Aw, snap. We are live. Let's go. All right. Oh, man. Audio check. Am I coming through okay? Am I coming through okay? We have an exciting one. We are wrapping up the stream series we were talking about in terms of addressing the seed oil slash soybean oil controversy. And this is going to be jam packed. This is going to be value packed. Got a lot of stuff, a lot of information we're going to cover. Should be fun. Saturday, good morning, good afternoon for some. Happy to see you guys. Good evening for others. Happy to see you guys. Sound is good. Yes. What's up, B? Good to see you. Sound is good. All right, let me move this over here. Streaming stuff. And it's good to see you guys. What's up? What's up? What's up? If you are new here, or if this is the first time you're catching us live, like, tell me, where are you from? And what is your town known for? Where are you from and what is your town known for? Boy, oh boy, do we have a fun one in this one here. We spent a lot of time in the first one talking about this study. So we have been reviewing this study. This is the most cited and quoted and pulled up study on No Lab Coat required, hands down. I pull this study up all the time to reference soybean oil's ubiquity. It's been in at least 3 videos, and I've used it to reference a bunch of stats and all this other stuff. It is an interesting paper, but it's so interesting and so necessary to talk about because it presents this contrarian viewpoint. Soybean oil, seed oils, vegetable oils, we know these things to be, let's just keep things simple. We know these things to be bad, right? But there is more conversation to have. So we've been going deeper, and this makes for a very healthy discussion because this opposite contrarian viewpoint, since it goes against what so many think, we can kind of find the truth and really find what's going on in the middle, right? If we're really searching for truth. So we spent a lot of time talking about this in last week's stream, and we talked about different things. We talked about the 3 types of fat. We talked about cholesterol, phospholipids, triglycerides. So if you want more information, you can go back on that. We talked all about LDL. So if LDL has never made a lick of sense to you, or if you always just wanted to know more about that, go ahead and check out that stream previously. It's titled the same thing. It's just a little bit of a different word, and it says part 1 and 2. This is going to be serving as part 3 and 4, and then we are moving on. I never want to talk about soybean oil after this. I am tired of it. I'm tired of talking about seed oils. There's so many other things we could talk about, but this is still going to be such a fascinating conversation. We talked about cardiovascular disease and how it develops as well in that last stream. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in this one here. This is not only about LDL and soybean oil and seed oils and vegetable oils. This is also about cardiovascular disease and how it is developed, right? So we spend a lot of time really making all of this make sense, because it's one thing to just throw soybean oil under the bus and say, hey, it's bad, but why, right? We want to talk about the mechanisms and what are some of the things that's actually behind this. We talked about LDL, and we're going to use a word here, heterogeneity, right? So how it varies from person to person. But not only that, but if you go into one person's blood vessel and you pull out an LDL particle and then you pull out another LDL particle, those 2 LDL particles could be totally different. So we're talking about the size, we're talking about if they're large, small, right? And then we talk about if they're modified or not. And then lastly, we also went over phytosterols, which is probably the biggest green light for vegetable oils or seed oils, is the fact that they actually do, by a mechanism, decrease cholesterol in the blood. And we're going to talk more about that. We're going to get right on into things. Do I have my water? Okay. But first, who's in chat? What's up, guys? What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? Yeah, pile on in. Where are you from and what is your town known for? What's up? What's up? What's up? That's a great take, Legends. I'm a human and not machinery. Why would I eat seed and vegetable oils? So for those that don't know, seed and vegetable oils, we actually derived the edible form from what used to be an industrial form. So when they arrived on the scenes a little bit prior to the 1940s, we were mainly using them for industrial purposes. So we put them in things like paint cans and then a bunch of other stuff. Especially its crude oil form, which is by definition disgusting, right? We don't want to, it smells bad, it looks bad, and we have to go through so many other processing steps of refinement in order to get it to a nice, feasible, edible product. And this didn't really take place until the 1940s, in which it was still not everybody's favorite oil. I mean, who's going to take seed oil over butter? But through some research, some dissemination of that research, and also through forcing soybean oil and other oils into margarine formulations, we started to eat it more and more. And there was an interesting paper that I read up on that, and it has quite the history. But why this is interesting is that soybean oil and seed oils and vegetable oils, this is new stuff, y'all. This is new stuff, right? If we talk about just how long humans have been on Earth, and then we compare that to when seed oils and vegetable oils have shown up, it's like, whoa, this is new. How does it impact us? And that's really what we've been getting at here. So this is a theme that you guys may have heard in my first stream, was that this is stuff that your doctor does know they can talk about, or in good faith, if I'm being charitable, I can say that I think they would know these things, right? But this is something that they can choose to be hip to, or choose to kind of turn a blind eye to and just give what they're told out, right? Which is that blanket statement of LDL is bad, HDL is good. And these streams are designed so that we can spend a little bit more time talking about what our doctors don't necessarily have the time to talk about with us, right? What's up? What's up, Kiha? That's what's up. Hope I'm saying your name right. Welcome, welcome. All right, let's get on into it. So, as stated, this stream is going to be talking about claim 3 and 4. Claim number 3 to kick things off of this review. This is the theme, right? We've been talking about this study, and this study we're going to keep coming back to because this is the most positive report card found on the entire internet for soybean oil and or seed oils. And it starts off by saying this claim number 3, soybean oil has no effect on markers of inflammation. Oh boy. Oh boy. So much like in the first stream, how we talked about if they're going to make a claim on cholesterol, we need to know what the heck cholesterol is. The same thing's going to take place here. So for markers of inflammation, what are we talking about, right? What are we talking about? Let's get into it. Let's get into it. Malwart, McDonald's, Arby's on the west side of Kansas. Oh, I hear that. I hear that. Yeah. See, here's the thing. Cisco says, hope I'm saying your name right. I notice a lot of my nutritional supplements are in capsules filled with soybean oil. See, here's the thing we have to recognize about fat, right? I hope I don't go on too many tangents in this one here. But here's the thing we have to recognize about fat in general, dietary fat, whether we're adding it, right, to our foods, or if they are in these packaged foods that we get, or if they are in a supplement or capsule or anything like that. We need fat. There is no version of good food without some kind of fat, right? That's why this discussion is such a big deal. We need fat to prepare food, right? We need fat for many reasons. And you take, I don't know, you can think about just about any food. It's really hard for us to make a viable, delicious product without some form of fat. And it just so happens that because of the way we're able to mass produce seed oils and mass produce the plants, right? And basically crush the seed that makes that oil, we're able to use this, I guess, seemingly more feasibly than we could animal fat. And that's why you're going to see soybean oil, vegetable oil, canola oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil in everything from baby food. And I'm talking about powderized baby food. How is there oil in that, right? How did that get there, right? From everything to roasted peanuts, like everything that is packaged is going to have some form of fat. It's just a matter of what form is actually there, right? What form is actually there. So let's get back to this. The markers of inflammation. We've heard of biomarkers. What are biomarkers, right? Bio meaning life, and then markers, right? So LDL is actually a biomarker. HDL is a biomarker. Some of us may get our lipid profile. We may hear triglycerides. That's a biomarker. My niece is screaming. My niece is here. She's visiting. You guys may hear her on the mic. So she's 5 or 6 months. She's young. She's adorable. I love her so much. But she's gonna be making noise. So just note that. Marker of inflammation. right? We have these different biomarkers. Now, what's interesting is that we can basically subclass these biomarkers. And one of the subclasses are markers of inflammation. So this makes sense, right? Because this is how I like to think about inflammation, because this word is tossed around often. Inflammation on a macro scale, I think about somebody coming by and just punching me straight in the arm, right? Just, I'm gonna get all bruised up, and I'm gonna have the 5 tenets of inflammation, which we know as redness, swelling, heat, pain, and sometimes loss of function, right? So that's inflammation on this macro grand scale. But we have to zoom in and realize that that feels that way and looks that way, but there are a bunch of very small ingredients that are causing this to happen. And this is when we can start to get into the conversation of actually measuring the pieces of the immune system that are causing this inflammation, because that's what inflammation is. Inflammation is just the activity of the immune system, and anything can cause it, right? So we want to talk about any threat, right? Any cut, scrape, burn, anything that threatens our health, anything that threatens in the acute moment, or even some of the more chronic things, right? So like immediate dangers, any intruder, bacteria, viruses, things of that nature, right? We can defend against those, and when we do, that is inflammation. That is inflammation taking place, right? So it's a very, very intuitive concept, right? We need defenses. And one of the ways I think about it is the different mini branches of the military. It's just like that for the immune system, because the immune system is not just this big old blanket one and done kind of linear thing, right? It has so many other branches, just like how our military system has the Army, we have the Navy. Who else we got? What we got? We got Marines, and we have, isn't there something else? Help me out. What do we have? Army, Marine, Navy, Air Force. We have the Air Force, right? We have the Air Force. I almost said National Guard. I was Googling like different military branches not too long ago. National Guard. Yeah. Thanks, B. Yeah, I was like, there's another one. Is the National Guard part of like the Army or something like that? I think I came across that as well. That's one thing that I get really, it's an interesting world, right? Because the classifications and the ranking and all that stuff that goes into military is so fascinating, because you have your colonels, your captains, your generals. It's like, what order does this stuff go? Your lieutenants, like, what even is that, right? So I find it a little confusing, but I'm not in the military, so what can I say? It probably makes sense for those that are Space Force, right? We have our Space Force. Okay, so our macrophages are also a example of a marker of inflammation, right? But basically all those military branches, they have one goal. They want to defend the homeland. Our immune system has so many tools in their arsenal, so many weapons, so many things, so many soldiers, so many branches, and they all operate a different, a little bit differently. But at the end of the day, they just want to defend the homeland, which in this case would be the body, right? It would be the body. So when we talk about a pro-inflammatory thing, there's an interesting mechanism take place. We have a threat, and then we have a pro-inflammatory response. Something threatens our health, and then we have a pro-inflammatory response, which is just the immune system saying, hey, let's respond, let's send out what we got, and let's try to squash the beef, squander the threat, right? That is very simple, very straightforward. We can measure the micro action of the immune system, because these specific little foot soldiers that come from the different branches of the immune system, we can actually measure them. So I say that to say we're going to actually run into a few of these specific foot soldiers that we measure, and I want us to be able to we don't really need to recognize them or remember them, but just I'm going to point them out when we come across that these are some of those more specific foot soldiers that are actually measurable, because all of a research, you can actually measure, you can get your blood work and you can actually measure these different little biomarkers. The Description is going to have every single thing that I talk about that has a number or a letter. Number one is that big old study we've been talking about. That's going to have the reference study that we've been going over. And so for this first claim or this third claim, they start off by saying something very weird. This is a very weird presentation to me. So again, we're talking about markers of inflammation. This is what they start off by saying. Soybean oil did not affect high sensitivity C-reactive protein compared to butter or stick margarine. C-reactive protein is one of those foot soldiers I was talking about. C-reactive protein is a marker of inflammation. Sometimes it's seen as CRP, right? He says, did not affect high sensitivity, or they say, high sensitivity C-reactive protein compared to butter or stick margarine. Now, this made sense just for what it is until I actually looked into the studies he was referencing. In this moment, the authors are referencing two different studies. They're comparable, and they're saying that these studies, essentially, this is what we're able to draw from these two studies. But when I look at the two studies, this is what is actually going on. Here are the two comparable studies that they were just referencing. There's something strange going on here. Study number one, about 20 folks, 19 folks to be exact, about equal male and female, over 50 years old with relatively elevated levels of LDL. They were put on 3 different diets. Each diet was 32 days each, and each diet was 30% fat. Of that 30% fat, they found a way to modulate it in a way that most of it would either be butter, soybean oil, or margarine. So let's take this back, right? Because this is scientific experimentation. But let's just imagine us in real life. We're put in a study and we were told to go on a challenge diet for 32 days. All the fat you consume, or most of the fat you consume, is straight up butter, nothing else, right? You do that, then you take a break, you come back and you do soybean oil, same protocol. You take a break, you come back and you do another protocol, but this time you do it with margarine. This is, see, I say this because this is brutal. We don't often realize how brutal scientific studies can be, but when you sign up and you give your consent, I don't know if anybody ever has been in a scientific study. I know a couple people who's been in one, but I've never actually been in one. But they can be brutal, right? And this second study over here, basically the same exact protocol, a few more folks at 30, again, about same amount of men and women, over 50, again, and an elevated levels of LDL-C. This time, now this is just ridiculous. They just made it that much harder. This time, it was 5 different diets, same percentage of fats, except this time it was 35 days each. So just a few more days each. But here's what's interesting. They use 5 different types of soybean oil. How can you even use 5 different types of soybean oil? I'll tell you. They essentially played around with the levels of saturation for each soybean oil. And we're going to talk a little bit more about saturation later in this stream. But this is so interesting because neither of these studies, or actually they're a little bit different. Let's put it this way. This first study over on the left has no mention of CRP, has no mention of C-reactive protein, right? So we just talked about this. Remember how this review started off. This was so weird. He says, soybean oil did not affect high sensitivity C-reactive protein compared to butter or stick margarine. This first study is the only study that actually looked at stick margarine, soybean oil, and butter. So you would think that this is the study he's talking about, but you can go to this in the references right now. Site number 2, Control F soybean oil, or Control F CRP, Control F C-reactive protein. There is not one mention of it. So where are the authors getting this finding from? So this raised my eyebrow. So I decided to look at the other study. And this is what they found. This is what the other study cites. I pulled this straight out of there. Site number 3, soybean oils have no significant effect on CRP concentration. In general, though, dietary fat has little effect on CRP concentrations. Now, do we need to know what CRP is? Because that we're using this word multiple times. No, we just need to know that it is a biomarker of inflammation. That is to say that when specific things threaten the body, an increase of a detectable, measurable biomarker would be CRP. In general, dietary fat isn't even affecting CRP concentrations. So why would this study, this review, start off by noting that soybean oil has little effect on them when they shouldn't really be in the conversation in the first place? And this also makes sense because this is why the first study didn't really talk about CRP or C-reactive protein, because it is not really a thing to talk about when you have the fat in conversation, right? When you're looking at fat. So it's just an interesting start to their defense here. And we're on claim number 3. We're on claim number 3. It's just a very interesting start. And Solano says, I understand, but like anecdotally, seed oil definitely makes me inflamed / bloated 100%. Yeah, and it's interesting because that's anecdotally, I would be very curious how seed oil would impact all of us, right? But the truth is, the science isn't the observational studies that are used, for example, in this review and in the review that we've been talking about, they are, in a sense, when you think about it, observational studies aren't really too far from anecdotal, right? Because you think about what observational studies are, right? You have to self-report. And when you're relying on self-evidence, right, the evidence coming from the person, what are we really talking about here? We're talking about anecdotes to a degree, right? So technically they're different, but the system in which we rely on self-reporting, I mean, we have the same pitfall. So if anecdotal evidence is so low on the scale of things that we should care about, why are observational studies even too much higher? And which they are. There are actual studies that talk about the different levels. Let's keep things rolling here. Let's keep things rolling. So I thought that was a very interesting start. So the question we have to ask right now, why is this paper defending soybean oil? Why is it really defending soybean oil? Why is it really defending soybean oil? I left this part out of the entire first stream. I left this part out of the part 1 and 2. I decided this was the opportune time to mention this. You got to think about why a paper would have 4 different defenses for soybean oil. What would be something that would even incentivize a researcher to do such a thing? Well, let's talk about it. This is the author, head author, lead author of this study. Now, I actually didn't want to show his face. I thought I had my pin over it. But this is the author. And his face doesn't matter. It feels like I don't want to isolate him out, right? Because he's not the problem. It's not him. It's just the system in which science allows these things to happen, right? This guy's not a villain, right? He does his job, but he is paid, and likely increasingly so, or actually, a better way to put it, his livelihood does really depend on the consumption of soybean oil, right? He is the lead researcher of the Soy Nutrition Institute, which would make sense why he has the head author title of this paper. I didn't talk about this at all. Let me see if I get a different color. I didn't talk about this at all but he is the lead researcher. I didn't talk about this at all until now, but what is frustrating is that most scientific studies, when there is a severe conflict of interest like this, they will state it. In most legitimate research, you get to the bottom, there is a statement that says, hey, we don't have any conflicts of interest to present here. And this paper did not do so, even though this is a significant conflict of interest. Even so, and I'm being 10 times more charitable than the average researcher or average health communicator. A lot of people would just completely write this paper off, don't give it a second look. What the heck? This guy's paid by this. All of this research is stupid. But no, I decided to do 2 separate streams on it, addressing every single claim, because it is worth the conversation. So even though this guy is getting paid, right? It's hard to imagine somebody who's being directly funded by the thing that they have to write research on, writing a bad research paper on it. It just would not make that much sense. In fact, there has been unpublished research in a lot of cases when the author is getting paid and they basically come across some unfavorable results and they're like, this isn't getting out, right? That's not uncommon in the scientific world. Yeah, gotta get paid. Yeah, what's up, Blue Freak says, yeah, you gotta get paid. Yeah, exactly. So this is one of the most interesting standout pieces of this paper. However, this still isn't even half of the story. Oh, we're gonna get into it. Oh, we are absolutely gonna get into it. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the actual biomarkers. So we're still talking about this claim number 3. So we're trying to figure out, so does soybean oil actually have an impact on inflammation? Or does butter? Or does stick margarine, right? So if we looking at this second study here, this Cites study, so this is a callback to the study in which they had the participants do either the butter, the stick margarine, or the soybean oil, right? So they were doing this for 32 days, and each participant did each diet. What's interesting, let's just focus on the LDL cholesterol here for a sec. What's interesting is that the LDL cholesterol did have a level in the blood of 177 milligrams per deciliter in the participants after they did the butter diet. And then for soybean oil, it was 150. We talked about this. We talked about how soybean oil decreases cholesterol in the blood. And we talk about that mechanism in which how that takes place in the first stream. That is legit. That actually takes place. Soybean oils, and we're going to interchange that with seed oils here, actually do decrease cholesterol levels in the blood because of that phytosterol, right? That pseudo cholesterol, or that plant equivalent of cholesterol, how it fights and it competes at the site of absorption for cholesterol, and it ends up winning out. Cholesterol loses, it gets passed on through, and that in return presents a state in which we have a lower LDL count and a lower LDL cholesterol count, right? Interesting. So let's talk about what actually takes place in the results. Let's talk about the inflammation. And we're going to talk a little bit back, talk a little bit about that HDL, or we can talk about it now. See, although if you look at the butter and you look at the soybean, right, what we have highlighted, the butter has 48, soybean has 45. That does not seem like a huge difference, but I want us to recognize here that butter, although it is giving us technically on a butter diet, we're going to have higher levels of cholesterol. In this study, they found that versus soybean oil, this is not causing a detriment to our HDL count. As stick margarine, for example, if you look at that, it's not highlighted, but they're at 42 for their HDL count, right? Butter actually still has the highest HDL count. So what is HDL? We haven't spent much time talking about. HDL is just a lipoprotein that basically presents the opposite impact of LDL. So if we know LDL is that fat deliverer, it goes out and it delivers fat all around, HDL is going to go around and scavenge. It's going to go out and hunt and and scavenge for fat and bring that back to the liver. So that is what HDL is doing. So as we can probably imagine, we want this to be and we want this to be in the right amount as well, right? So we don't want to over deliver, and never have something go back out and scavenge for that stuff that is not there, or that for that stuff that does not need to be there. But I just wanted us to realize that these numbers, although they're close, are still statistically significant. And that's why they have the different letters by them. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more with this first graph here. So let's look at this. So now we're talking about, is soybean oil or stick margarine or butter, what is actually taking place in the blood following the consumption of these items, right? Are we actually having a pro-inflammatory response? So if the two letters are different, they are significant. There's a significant difference. So that is to say that there is a significant difference between the stick margarine here and soybean oil, as one is A, one is B, but there is no significant difference between butter and stick margarine, for example, or butter and soybean oil, right? The difference is not statistically significant. So really all we're caring about here is stick margarine and soybean oil. And we're going to see a running theme throughout this study that stick margarine is getting the short end of the stick. That stuff is just not great for you. It is absolutely promoting pro-inflammation. So if we look at this here, one of the inflammatory biomarkers is TNF, tumor necrosis factor. Now this is a biomarker. We don't need to know like the details of it. But what we're saying essentially here is that when we take this in, soybean oil and butter, the difference that comes out from TNF is basically negligent. There is no difference. The only difference would be if we were to take in stick margarine, and then you see that increase here in the bar, right? And the theme keeps going. The theme keeps going. If we look at this one here, butter, stick margarine, soybean oil, there's actually no difference. This is interleukin 1 beta, right? This is another inflammatory biomarker, and there's no difference across the three, right? There are no letters, there is no significance. That is to say that every diet they put these participants on for this specific inflammatory biomarker, nada, nothing, nope, nothing to report. Let's keep it going. They have another graph, interleukin 6. Okay, all right, interesting here. There is no difference between stick margarine and butter, and there is no difference between butter and soybean oil. There's only a difference between stick margarine and soybean oil. Now, for those that are unfamiliar with stick margarine or margarine just in general, right? It's 9 times out of 10 made with some type of seed or vegetable oil, and it is hydrogenated, and it presents a higher percentage of what we call trans fats. And you can go left, right, up, down, across diagonal. I don't care where you look. There is not a single health communicator or researcher or doctor or physician or practitioner in the world that's going to sit here and defend trans fats. Not happening. The stuff is gross. It's going to have an increase on your inflammation in all of these areas. Probably not all of these areas, but as we can see, it has shown its ugly head in interleukin 6, right? This interleukin 6, again, is a pro-inflammatory biomarker. So margarine, if we understand anything, right? No, we don't want to be eating that. We can stay away from margarine. It's not helping, right? So it is worlds away from butter, and it is even worlds away from soybean oil, right? And it's probably, and I say probably very intentionally here, probably because of the levels of trans fats that takes place, right? Trans fats are essentially, nature does not make trans fats. We make trans fats, right? So we talk about margarine, we talk about fake oil, right? We talk about vegetables, right? That stuff is made because of the modifications and the chemistry and the heat and the pressure that goes into us transforming these fats to where they can be more stable, they can last longer on the shelf, they can be more versatile, they can be more uniform. That is when we start to introduce these trans fats. And that's when things get ugly. Mark that, Naomi. Let's keep things rolling and rocking. The study keeps going. The study keeps going. Here's another one. This is the definitive increase in inflammation from soybean oil. So this is a induration index which essentially comes from a test that slips my mind, but it's a non-specific test of your immune system's general response, right? It's a non-specific test of your immune system's response. And if you look at this, there's a significant difference between butter and soybean oil, but not between stick margarine and butter, not between stick margarine and soybean oil. And I hope these letters are making sense. But essentially, soybean oil, this is the first thing that shows, hey, when we take in soybean oil, there is an inflammatory response. Yes, this study keeps going. It never stops. The science never stops. Okay, so that is fascinating. That's the first definitive look at what is actually taking place in the blood when we consume these different types of fat, right? So we're really diving into this third claim here. And if we look at this next one, this is just a short, let's just talk about this really quick. So this is from the same study. Cholesterol isn't increased after butter intake. What we have to understand is that butter is a natural food, normal food. Our cholesterol levels just are what they are after we eat butter. If there was an issue, we'd see that the butter was significantly more inflammatory than the other items in the study that we're talking about, but they weren't. So we know that there is no immediate issue. But if we're talking about the lipid profile, what takes place in our blood after we consume it has cholesterol, right? Butter and animal fat, it has cholesterol. So we're going to have a little bit more cholesterol in the body, sure, but this is what it is. This is a normal response. So it is not technically correct to say that butter increases cholesterol. We just get a one-to-one response after we eat it. But it is fair game and totally correct to say that soybean oil or seed or vegetable oil does decrease cholesterol levels. Reason being because of how it antagonizes the absorption of cholesterol at the literal site of our intestines, right? So that is fair game to say that cholesterol is actually decreased after vegetable oil intake. And it's just really a frame of mind conception, right? So it's a perception. So it really depends on just how you're looking at it at the end of the day. So the example with the organic food that I talk about all the time is organic food isn't like expensive, right? Organic food, it just is what it is. That's the price of buying food. That's regular food. But non-organic food or processed food or the stuff that is a little cheaper, it's just cheaper, right? So it's not that good food is expensive. It's just that bad food is just cheaper, right? And I use that example oftentimes when people are like, organic food is so expensive, like it costs so much to eat healthy. Well, there's multiple ways to attack this argument, but for one, eating healthy does not necessarily mean going organic. They're not two in the same. Organic is just say, hey, I want peak quality, right? But a problem is that when people want that peak quality, it does come with a higher price point relative to things that are not of the same quality. So we can talk about literally just, I don't know, asparagus, organic asparagus and non-organic asparagus. Two of the same foods, one comes without the pesticides and the chemicals, and you're going to pay a little bit more. But I guess the idea I'm trying to get at here is that is regular food. Let's not forget that pesticides are not normal, right? That is regular food. That is the cost of buying regular asparagus. It's just that the stuff that is pesticide ridden is cheaper. So it's just a way that we frame it, right? It's just a way that we frame it, that organic or healthy is not expensive. The stuff that is not is just cheap. So the question is, how much does cholesterol actually matter here? Because we talk so much about LDL and we talk so much about the dangers of how CVD is actually developed, right? And remember, that comes from LDL being modified. And I'm so excited for you guys to get to that part. We're going to talk at the end, and it's going to be just like putting all the puzzle pieces. You know, when you're building a puzzle and you have those final few pieces in the middle and then like you're finished, like that satisfying thing, that's going to come at the end of this and it's going to click and it's all going to make sense. Maximum aha moments for all of us. We're going to get there in a few. But essentially, this is a rhetorical question, but I want this to be in the back of our minds. How much does cholesterol really matter here? right, as a biomarker? How much does it really matter here? Seeing that it is a fat that has 3 or more jobs, just like a bunch of other different things in the body, and it does its job. It's put in the body to do what it does, right? It goes into cell membranes, it helps to make steroid hormones, it helps to make bile, right? How much of this is really a problem? How much of cholesterol intake is really a problem, right? I want us to have that question in the back of our minds. Chat, how we doing? It's good to see everybody piling in here. What's up, y'all? I grew up in the 90s. It is hard to imagine food costing as much as it does now. Fair game, 100%. Call organic food, and put a negative label on exactly, Isaac, exactly. It's just a different frame of mind. And for those that are newly health conscious, it's tough because when you think of healthy, when you think of healthy groceries, you think, oh, higher price point. But I mean, organic, why does organic have to be the standout label? Why can't we have non-organic be the standout label, right? We just have regular food and then we have non-organic. I don't know. It's just a thought. Just a thought. Yeah. Mark that, Naomi, please. I don't know. I think about that all the time because I'll say this. Who else is like this? You have that one thing you splurge on. For me, it's ingredients at the grocery store. Like, why did I say ingredients? Groceries. For me, it's groceries. I will spend as much money as it costs to get the groceries that I want. All right. I love dates. Dates are pricey. Let's use that word. And I don't care. I don't care. I will get the organic, non-pitted dates. They have the pit in them. Whole dates, the medjool dates, and I want them, so I will buy them, right? If I want 2 cases, I will get 2 cases. So essentially what I'm saying is that there's a lot of things that we can negotiate our spending on, but why do we choose to negotiate our spending on food, right? Why not just get the best food? We spend money on so many other things, right? The amount of money people spend on not Uber Eats, but the Uber Eats delivery fee, right? We don't take these things into account, right? And at some point, we're just talking about budgeting, and I'm not an economist or I'm not a personal finance guy. I don't want to get into the conversation, but essentially, it's just a frame of mind change. That's all. It's just saying that why do we skimp out on quality or healthy stuff when it comes to food, seeing that this is what our entire existence is even made out of? When we want to put the best in our body, just a thought. Just a thought. Just a thought. I love walnuts. I always get a big bag of shelled walnuts at Walmart. Then I eat. It moved. And then I eat all. Then I eat it all in 3 days. This emoji. Cisco, I am very much you and me are alike in that regard. I am a walnut, pecan, peanut, cashew, pecan. I should say that. What else? I keep those on me at all times. Let's just put it that way. Almonds. I keep that on me at all times. Aldi, I'll go in there and just absolutely ravage those shelves. Give me all the bait. And this is what you do. You don't go to your, I'm sorry, we're going off on a tangent here. You don't go to your freaking, you don't go to where they sell the nuts to buy the nuts. You go to the baking aisle. Please, somebody, amen in here. You go to the baking aisle. You're going to get them for cheaper, right? Why would you go get the actual walnuts from where they sell, from the nut aisle? But when you can go to the baking section, you get the chopped joints and you get the cheap, it's cheaper. It's game, gang. It's game, gang. Come on, man. What are we talking about? That's an advanced level strategy. You take your butt to the baking aisle, man. That's advanced right there. What are we talking about? I'm sorry. Where were we? People are gonna rewatch the stream and they're gonna be like, "Get on with it." Well, I'm live. You should have been here. Just kidding. I want everybody to get value. This stuff is life-changing. I kid you not. Again, this is just stuff your doctor does not have the most time to talk about. Baking area has walnuts. Yes, they have walnuts. They have pecans. They have the things that would typically go like, I don't know, wait, what do people, like muffins, right? You want to bake a blueberry, I don't know, walnut muffin, right? You go to the baking section, they're cheaper, right? And it's the same exact thing. And oftentimes it's just that, right? Oftentimes you go to the where they actually have the nuts and stuff, and they got like these oils and stuff. And it's just like, no, go to the baking section and you actually just get the whole thing. There's no extra ingredients. Like the ingredient list says one thing. That is always going to turn me on as a grocery shopper. The ingredient list says one thing, right? That's the best. Okay. All right. Did we go over this? How much does cholesterol, how much does it matter? Yes. Now I want us to understand this concept here. This is so fascinating to me. This is going to be in my personal notes. If you guys want to do it, it's next to something that probably says further reading or something like that. So it's a Quizlet link if you want to check that out. But specifically, this is an extracted quote from a piece of research that lives in my head rent-free every time I eat. Just kidding, not every time I eat, but I do think about this. Check this out. Nutrient ingestion, while obviously beneficial, can also be thought of as perturbing physiological homeostasis. So let's break this down a little bit. Physiological homeostasis, we know this as that physiological balance, right, is the more rudimentary word. And that really is just this state in which our levels are leveling, right? That's the best way to put it. And oftentimes when it comes to homeostasis, we think about our endocrine system. We think about our hormones having proper amounts of things that change our metabolism in the blood at the right moments. That is homeostasis, and it's continual, right? Balance is never steady. Balance is always a period of like constant adjustments. Like whatever this is I'm doing with my arm, I don't know, but my brain was like, do this. Whatever this is I'm doing with my arm, this is balance, right? It's constant adjusting. What's this called? A seesaw. A seesaw, you see? That's where we're getting at here. What's interesting is that, again, we usually talk about, when it comes to homeostasis, we talk about the immune system, but I want us for a second to think about immune system activity as a homeostatic regulator. So we always have a certain amount of immune cells and immune acting proteins or items in the body, just at all times, right? But they increase when we are threatened. Well, think about it. That increase is to nullify the threat and bring us back down to regular levels. That, in a way, is a homeostatic mechanism. Even though it doesn't get much spotlight, our immune system does indeed contribute to homeostasis. Right? Mark that, Naomi, please. Food, or not yet, actually mark it after this. Food is far from totally benign. This fascinates me. Think about it. The food that we eat, there's bacteria, especially if you get it here in America, you're going to have all kinds of pesticides and chemicals on it, right? That stuff goes into our body, and we're going to have, to some degree, to varying degrees, immune responses. And it's just fascinating because that immune response knocks us out of homeostasis as we're eating, right? We're taking things from the outside world, bringing them into the body, breaking them down, and then rebuilding them up. That is quite the task. Our body is being knocked out of homeostasis, gradually brought back after every single morsel that we consume. While obviously it's beneficial, we're being technical here, and it's a very interesting thing to think about. The greatest threat to human health is that of which comes through our mouth. And you think about, I don't know if you guys ever heard that 70% of our immune system is right there in our gut. And that's where it's housed, essentially, right? And you think about it, why? Well, that's our most vulnerable point. It's right there at the gut area. All those influences from the outside world, food is an intruder, right? We got to be ready for that stuff. And we don't know what's coming along with it. Again, we talk about viruses, we talk about bacteria, we talk about germs, we talk about the chemicals we put on our food. They're going to give us an inflammatory response. The question is, it's to varying degrees, right? So it's not that outrageous to think about, for example, I don't know. Oh, mark that for me, please, Naomi. It's not that outrageous or obscure to think about the fact that butter, right? Butter has different impacts on our inflammatory response, because we can get butter from different sources, right? The healthier the cow, seemingly, at least, and in most definitely, the higher quality the butter, and hopefully the less of an immune response would take place, right? But it's just a very interesting thing to talk about. So when we were looking at that study, it never ends. Somebody said it never ends. I think Blue Freak said it never ends, right? If we're looking at that study and we just talk about, this is just a random graph. The graph doesn't matter. It's just the fact that there is inflammatory action. There is immune system action after we eat, right? Now, don't get freaked out over this. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to stop eating for the rest of my life. My immune system's activated. No, this just is normal. We just don't give it thought. So there is levels of immune activity in the blood after butter, stick, margarine, soybean oil. Does not matter. These are foreign intruders. At the very least, the immune system's got to run up, check it, and like, hey, state your name, state your place, state your claim, you know. And then once it's checked, he's like, all right, you can pass, right? It's kind of like if we say 70% of the immune system's there, right at the gut there. It's like, you know, you seen those movies when you go to the back door of like a building and you knock and the security guard, he like slides a little thing. He's like, password. And then you're like, password. And then they let you in, right? That's the immune system. It's just like, tell me the password and then you can come in, right? If not, we're going to light you up. Yes, we are personifying, characterizing the immune system today. That's what we're doing on a Saturday morning. Immune system, Lloyd says, immune system demands papers now. Yeah. Yeah. Wait, give me your identity. Give me your identity. What you got? Who are you? State your name, state your claim. Right? That's what we're getting at here. All right, let's keep things rolling before I get lost in the sauce. I'm known to do that. So we talked about this a little bit. Now, let's just talk about this. Let's just say this really quick. And then we're about to move on to claim 4. We're about to move on to claim 4. Does sourcing matter? Yes, we just talked about that. What actually is fat? Fat, for all intents and purposes, more than anything, right, is actually, then our ears got to perk up here. This is where things get a little bit more important. This whole fourth and final part is where things really get connected. Fat is material before it is anything, right? Proteins, they do something totally different than fat. Carbs, they do something totally different than fat in the body. Fat, for all intents and purposes, when it comes in the body, it is going to be used up as material. Let's look at it this way. What's the difference between protein and fat? Like protein, it comes in the body, and I think of it as our regular world items. So that is, if you look around in your room right now, like if I look around in my room, I have my microphone right here. That's a protein. I have my camera. That's a protein. My light, it's a protein. Proteins in the body are basically items that are everyday items that just do things. They just exist, right? And there's so many varying cases that we have to keep it broad and general like that. But the difference when we start talking about fat, and we're going to use a word here, lipids, right? Interchangeable. When we talk about those, we're talking more about structure. So I'm looking around in my room, my door would be a fat. The walls in my room would be a fat. If there's a big old pillar standing here in the middle of the floor, like holding up the ceiling, that would be a fat, right? So fat in the body really just makes up our structures, and protein are kind of the things like that are inside of these structures performing most of the actions. Mark that for me, Naomi, please. Yo, in and out, what is good? Long time no see. It was good to see you. What are your caffeine habits? Do you drink coffee or matcha in the morning? Which energy drinks do you prefer? Man, shout out for the 10. I really appreciate that. So I don't have any caffeine habits. And funny enough, you just predicted my next video. So for the, how many people we got in here? For the 77 or so people we have in here right now, you have a glimpse into my next video. We're going to be talking about caffeine, coffee intake, dependencies, how coffee drinkers' bodies are totally different. It's quite the fascinating stuff when you dive into it, and it's going to be a fun video. Hopefully I have that out sooner rather than later, which is arbitrary. I'm a YouTuber, so we don't give hard dates because we lie. So no, I don't drink coffee. I'm not opposed to it. I just don't know really where to start. And hopefully after I do put this video out, you guys have some helpful comments to help me start, or you guys could drop them now. Like, where do I start? Do I, I think I like iced coffee, but I don't know. It's been like a little bit of time and I drink it so sparingly. Um, Apparently 85% of the entire American population are caffeine drinkers, apparently. And I've never felt more like an outsider. I've never had more FOMO in my life than when I realized that fact. Yeah, but thanks In and Out. And then which energy drinks do you prefer? High quality coffee. I mean, it's just a matter of timing because sleep is so important. You don't want to mess with your sleep, right? So many people have issues falling asleep and they just don't realize it has to do with the fact that they had an afternoon cup of coffee. You don't have to have caffeine right before bed to have trouble with sleeping because with the research I was doing with the half-life and all this other stuff, depending on your body as well, can really determine the difference in duration in which caffeine gets out of your system. But the bottom line is, if you want good sleep, if you take your sleep very seriously, I'd cut caffeine off like before the afternoon even begins. So like noon. And for me, for a guy like me, that's cutting it close because I would prefer caffeine to be totally out of my system, right? So if you have 2 cups of coffee before noon, call it. That's it for the day, right? And I don't know people's coffee habits, so I could be totally off. Like maybe people are drinking 3, maybe they're drinking 1, maybe they have, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, right? I'm not 100% sure, but I'm not opposed to coffee. I'm not opposed to coffee. But you gotta know that it is gonna disrupt your sleep if you have it in the evening, right? And sometimes we can have our sleep time, but it's gonna disrupt our quality sleep. There's a difference between sleeping and being unconscious. Legends, you don't drink coffee. What's up, Salt Miser or Miser? I struggle with that. Sorry if I say your name wrong. Never drink coffee. Used to drink sweet tea because I'm from the South. But oh, that's what's up. But once I drop sugar, I'm like, why even drink tea if there is no sugar? Yeah, and tea has somewhat negligible, but there's still amounts of caffeine in tea as well, right? The things that have natural caffeine in order of concentration: coffee, tea, chocolate, cocoa or cocoa if you're me, cocoa if you're me, and fluoride. What? What? Oh man. Do you guys use toothpaste with? Do you guys' toothpaste have fluoride? Do you guys' toothpaste have fluoride? Uh oh, here we go. Do you guys' toothpaste have fluoride? Here we go. Uh oh. So I was using fluoride-less toothpaste for probably about a year, give or take. And yeah, I find it makes no difference in terms of my teeth health, I guess. I just had a doctor's not a doctor's dentist appointment. I enjoy a dentist expertise. I ask anytime I see a dentist, I ask them the same questions every time, and their answers are the same every single time. Their answers are the same every single time. Should I use mouthwash? Yes. Should I floss? Yes. How many times? Twice a day. How many times should I brush my teeth? Twice a day. What toothpaste do you recommend? Oh, it doesn't matter. Colgate's cool. Dentists probably know so much about teeth, but the actual applicable stuff, it's like, oh, we already know that. I respect dentists so much. Yes, my toothpaste has fluoride. My water is untreated, so no added fluoride. Yeah, I only say that to say that fluoride is it's controversial when you get really niche and on the fringes of health conversations. So I added it back. I have yet to do firsthand investigative research, but I even asked my dentist about it on my last checkup. It was this week. I literally just came from the dentist. They numbed up my cheek and gave me all kind of stuff. I was like, what's going on here? But I say all that to say, rambling. Sorry. I say all that to say, I asked my dentist. I was like, hey, does fluoride in the toothpaste matter? And he was like, you know, there was a point in time where people were considering it as a toxic heavy metal because that's what it is, right? We're talking about a mineral. It's like, there was a point in time where people thought it was toxic, but there's been a whole bunch of research and reviews, and he got me with that word. He said research. And it's relatively harmless. We find it's not toxic. And he said it confidently, so I was convinced. That's how health works in America. In case you guys didn't know, you don't get people like me all the time breaking down LDL particles. Sometimes you just get an anecdote from your doctor or your dentist or your mom or your dad, and now you know if a thing is healthy or not. And that's part of the problem. But I am also aware of when that thing happens. Like, I can do the first-hand investigative research on fluoride and stuff, right? But I could also ask my dentist and just be like, okay, I believe you, right? It's up to me, and it's up to you guys too. Okay, for the love of heavens, claim number 4. Aw, snap. Thank you, Rebecca. What's up? Good to see you. Okay, by the miser. Got you, Salt. Got you, miser. Cool. Yeah, thank you for that phonetic spelling. Huh. Good to see you, Rebecca. Yeah, toothpaste. No longer. Who said haters? I read haters somewhere. Haters. Coffee was free or cheap in workplaces through the 90s. Then coffee list favor and coffee. Then coffee list favor and coffee lovers had to have posh brews. That is coffee language, and it's way above my pay grade. I am not going to address that comment because I just don't even know what I just read. I don't know what posh is. I'm not a coffee drinker. Sorry, forgive me. Okay. Soybean oil lowers cholesterol. This is a study we've been talking about. So, claim number 4, and this is the end all be all here. Soybean oil has no effect on markers of inflammation. Ah, snap. Ah, snap. Soybean oil has no effect on markers. Did I say inflammation? On markers of oxidation. Claim number 4. Now, out of all the 4 claims, we addressed 1, we addressed 2, we addressed 3. Of all of those claims, this causes my knee to jerk more than a knee-jerking knee could jerk. My knee-jerk response to this is, what? What is this guy? What? What do you mean? When we talk about soybean oil, seed oils, vegetable oils, across the board, I don't care who you're talking to, this is the conversation that takes place. So funny this is the last, because it's far from the least, is the conversation of oxidation. Because what do you mean? But this is very calculated language. Notice the authors say soybean oil has no effect on markers of oxidation. Oh man, this is just advanced level language usage in science, right? Markers is a very intentional word here because these researchers would get laughed out of any room if this said soybean oil has no effect on oxidation. They would get laughed out of any room. Now, why is this? Let's get through this. Why is this? So when you look at the study, and I have this knee-jerk reaction to this claim number 4. You wonder what they say for this claim. So this is how the paper's set up for those that haven't looked at it. For each claim, there is basically a section. So they were talking about, cholesterol. There's a section on that. They were talking about coronary heart disease. There's a section on that. Same with inflammation. And now we're getting to the section on oxidation. For one, it's the shortest section. And it's understandable because this presents the strongest case against soybean oil. So if I was writing a paper pro soybean oil, I would basically avoid or skirt past this topic as best as I can, which even baffles me why they included this in the first place, to try to refute the fact that soybean oil, you guys see what I'm saying? Like, it's what does it say? It says nothing. It says nothing, guys. I checked it. It says nothing. I checked it. The paper has 4 sections. This is the 4th section. And I read through it. Again, this is the most cited paper. I have it right here. This is the only research paper I've ever printed out for no lab coat required. I have it. You guys see what I'm saying? I have it. Is it focusing? I want it to focus. I have it. I read this word for word multiple times. And I could try to sit here and extract some type of value or um, some type of nuance or some type of deep conversation or really just, um, I would be hammering in a ghost nail if I sat here and tried to really talk about the section on oxidation because when you guys can check it for yourselves, there is nothing. This is where this paper falls short. There is nothing. It's baseless, right? It's this is where the paper stumbles on itself, right? This is where the researchers are like, okay, everything else we had evidence for, but for oxidation, we got nothing. I got nothing for you. So since they have nothing, let me present to you the claim number 4, part 4, soybean oil, and oxidation. Soybean oil and oxidation. Let's do this first. Copy, paste, 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 paste. Boom. Shakalaka. Boom, 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 boom. All right. Awesome sauce. Okay, let's talk about this. This has so many slides and stuff. It takes me so long to make these slides, guys. We're almost there. Okay. Okay. Again, nothing. So what's after this? After this claim? Let's get into it. So we talked about this LDL particle. Oh, it's rearing its head again. You guys need to apply for board certification after this because you guys right now are scientists. You guys are straight up. You guys need a certificate because you guys on this little corner of the internet have learned more about LDL than most people will ever know, right? You guys in this stream and in my last stream have probably learned more about LDL than researchers who, right? Like you guys probably know more about LDL than researchers who forgot what they know about LDL, if that makes sense. There's this old guy who was talking about basketball one day in the park, and he said, I know more about basketball than these young kids forgot. No, I forgot more about basketball than these young kids forgot. I tried to make that a thing. I'm rambling into a hole here. I'm sorry. So what is present on the LDL particle? We have triglycerides, we have cholesterol, and we have phospholipids. We're not going to spend time talking about these items because we did in the first stream. But we really need to highlight because we said that we weren't going to talk about phospholipids too much in the first stream. But it's time that we do because this is the mechanism of importance. Phospholipids. Phospholipids. Remember how I talked about how fat in the body essentially is making up the walls and the interior. It's building the structures in which our cells and organs and tissues live, right? Well, that is because of the job of these phospholipids. These phospholipids are the membranes or the outer wall of these items in the body, of this small LDL particle. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. We gotta zoom in. We got to zoom in. Check this out, guys. Check this out. So, can I draw? Will it let me draw? What can I draw today? Okay. Ooh, I don't like that color. No. That's a cool color. Does that work? That's a cool color. This is what we're talking about, guys. Look at this. This is these are phospholipid tails, right? These are phospholipid tails. So when we talk about these fatty acids, that's a word there. We're going to return to that. When we talk about these fatty acids, you see how some are straight, right? You got some that are straight. You got some that are kinked. Like, look at the kink in this one, right? These are just visual representations of their saturation. And we're going to talk about that. This is where everything clicks. But Yeah, I can see my the person who I commissioned to do this, they went all out. I'm like, can I get some straight and some curved? He was like, yeah, gotcha. How about this? One straight as an arrow, and one is bent as a road, like this. Okay, so that is what we are really talking about when we are talking about the LDL particle and its phospholipids. That is what we're highlighting here. Those yellow tails are phospholipids. So let's talk about that here. Let's talk about that here. Because I want this to make absolute sense. I want this to make absolute sense. So when we're here, this, oh, I don't like that color. This, oh, that's a cool color, but it's not going to work. This is a phospholipid. It's a phospholipid. Very, very simple. At the top, it has a head. At the bottom, it has these fatty acid tails. These fatty acid tails. Right? The top doesn't matter. Boop. What really matters are these fatty acids. Remember, this is just one phospholipid. Nothing in nature has just one phospholipid. This doesn't even exist. But we're zooming in. We're extremely microscopic because I want us to understand what is going on here. What is going on here? So, when we talk about fatty acids and their degree of saturation, this is actually what we're talking about. Let me see if I can move this out the way. Oh, help me out. The fatty acid tails can be saturated or unsaturated. This is what the level of saturation is actually what we're referring to when we classify certain foods. And you guys can actually watch an entire video on this. I made a supplementary list of material in the description, and you can actually check that out. One of the videos there is going to be talking about this concept that I'm getting at here. Videos that I made, and they are in the description. You could look at vid C. But check this out. Check this out. This is what we're getting at, right? These are fatty acid tails. These are fatty acid tails. Right? Right over. We got to change our color, guys. What color are we doing? Shift. Oh, yellow is perfect here. So these here are fatty acid tails, right? This is the same exact thing. So this is the concept that we have to match right now in our heads. When we eat fat, remember how we talked about majority of them are triglycerides. It's very simple. Triglycerides are just 3 fatty acid tails. The amount doesn't matter. We just need to understand the concept that a fatty acid is a fatty acid is a fatty acid. That means when a fatty acid is absorbed, it translates directly into being the same exact thing when it's in the body, right? The amount of unsaturated or saturated fat that we consume directly translate to the amount of saturated or unsaturated fat in our cells, right? That is to say that if we're looking at this butter here, it has all fats. It has saturated fat, it has monounsaturated fat, it has polyunsaturated fat. Again, watch video C in the description if you want to know what the difference between mono and poly is. But really, it's really molecular. And we're talking about what we call double bonds, right? And there is a degree of saturation. The more double bonds, right? If you have 2 or more double bonds, you have polyunsaturation. If you have 1, you have monounsaturation. That does not matter yet. So forget that. I'm just throwing that out because I don't want anything to catch us off guard. We know butter as a saturated fat, but it has everything. It has saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, and polyunsaturated fat. So let's keep that in mind. Let's keep that in mind. So because of that, let's see, let's translate onto screen. Oh, boo. Boo. Okay, we can use this. Fatty acid composition of common fats and oils. This is really what we've been waiting to get to. So ears got to perk up here. Some of us may have seen this on this channel. I've used this before, and this is why I'm low-key tired of talking about fat and soybean oil. But here's the thing. Polyunsaturated fat is the most vulnerable to what we call oxidation. It is the most vulnerable to what we call oxidation, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more about oxidation, but look at the fats that are most vulnerable. Safflower oil, sunflower oil, corn oil, soybean oil that we've been talking about, cottonseed oil is there, right? All of these with majority blue, these are polyunsaturated fatty acids, right? Polyunsaturated fat. Fish oil, right? Salmon, fish oil, sesame oil, right? All of these have a great amount of susceptibility to oxidation. That is not to say that monounsaturated fats, right there in the middle, or saturated fats primarily, do not present a degree of susceptibility at all, right? We can have coconut oil, even though it's going to take a little bit of work, but we can have coconut oil go rancid, and we can eventually break it down to where oxidation wins and the oil goes bad, right? It's just a lot less likely to take place than that of some of the more polyunsaturated fats, right? Very simple concept. Very simple concept. Very simple concept. And it works like this. Saturated fat goes out into war, has a shield and a sword. Monounsaturated fat, no shield, just a sword. Polyunsaturated fat, totally vulnerable, no weapon, no defense. It's the most likely to go down by the enemy. The enemy in this case is oxidation. So what is oxidation? Because it's a buzzword in health, it gets thrown around, so therefore it's a little confusing. But let's understand it as this. It's necessary. We're talking about something that's atomically small scale. So we're talking about very, very, very little, right? The actual action of oxidation is so small, it's irrelevant right now. All we need to know is that it takes place regardless, and we need it just in the right amounts, right? We need oxidation to exist, but also we can overdo it. And then you hear you hear words like oxidative stress, right? And we think about some of the diseases that's attributed to and all these other things, right? But oxidation, much like inflammation, is needed at all times, just in varying degrees. And we can overdo it. We can actually introduce oxidation into the system, and we can nullify oxidation. How? Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we can nullify oxidation, and we can introduce it into our system. Fascinating. Fascinating. We talked a little bit about this. If I eat saturated fat, nothing but saturated fat, that's going to have a one-to-one, a near one-to-one impact on the composition of my cells. That is to say that if I eat a lot of saturated fat, my cells will be made up of a lot of saturated fat. If I eat a lot of polyunsaturated fat, then my cells would be made up of a lot of polyunsaturated fat, right? If this is the case for our cells, why would this not be the case for our LDL, right? Remember, a fatty acid is a fatty acid is a fatty acid. And if polyunsaturated fatty acids possess this greater risk of becoming oxidized, and if those are the things that are making up our LDL particles, would it be too obscure to assume that our LDL particle made up of a bunch of polyunsaturated fatty acids is more susceptible to oxidation? No, it would not be obscure to think that. In fact, that is scientific law, so much so that the paper we've been reviewing states that as well. This is scientific law. This is also the stuff that we just don't have time to explain in quick appointments with our doctor. But this is really this is really what we should be talking about, is the composition of our LDL particles. Could you mark that for me, Naomi, please? So what happens? Remember, guys, we're talking about that yellow here. We're talking about that yellow line, that yellow membrane. Those are the literal fatty acids, right? Those are the literal fatty acids. So let's see if I can pop this out here. Boom. These here. Oh. Ooh, red's nice. These here are the literal fatty acids, right? That's what we're talking about. What kind of weird line is that? Let's just do this. Right. This is what we're talking about, those yellow lines. So what happens when these fatty acids, right, these phospholipids, right? I don't want to throw too many scientific words at you. Let's break it down this way. Phospholipids is just the structure, right? That just means that the fatty acids are arranged this way. Triglycerides is just the structure. That is to say that the fatty acids are arranged this way, but they don't matter. What matters is a fatty acid. A fatty acid is a fatty acid is a fatty acid. They're one-to-one unless stated otherwise. So we're looking at this LDL particle. And when it becomes oxidized, and actually, there's a bit of a chain reaction that takes place, right? So one oxidized fatty acid can actually lead to another and another and another. This is what happens when we have high levels of oxidation in the body. We're going to talk about what kind of contributes to that here in a bit. But you guys remember in the first stream, we spent so much time talking about modified LDL, right? We talked about how modified LDL presents and is the initiating step, right? It's the first step for the cascade of the development of cardiovascular disease, right? Everything that comes from cardiovascular disease, it all hinges on if our LDL is modified or not. Remember, that's the pivotal point. Remember, we talked about that seminal point. So when we oxidize our LDL, that is a version of a modified LDL. We didn't go into the specifics in the first stream, but it's so significant that we actually gave it a name. When an LDL particle becomes oxidized, we call it ox LDL or OX LDL. Ox LDL is modified LDL. So let's zoom out a little bit because we're really micro right now. Modified LDL is an umbrella term, but there's different types of modified LDL. They just present the same result at the end of the day. Normal LDL, great, awesome, harmless, benign. The moment it modifies, over time, this continues and we talk about developing cardiovascular disease. Ox LDL is the most substantial, significant, the most talked about type of modified LDL, right? But it is not the only one. It's not the only one, right? This making sense for you guys? I hope that made a lot of sense. I'm learning a lot. I love your channel. Thank you so much, Legends. Oh, thanks so much, New Sheep. Confirmation email or any way to check out my order status. You should be getting the email sooner rather than later. I don't know if it sends instantly, but you should be getting the email sooner rather than later. If not, when it ships, they will certainly get an email. Thanks for that. That sounds like a difficult thing to test for. Yes, it is very difficult to test for ox LDL. So what I want us to get from this, because that's such a great observation, Isaac. Thank you for that. This does not call for a change in which our lipid profiles are presented, right? We don't need to start drawing our blood in different ways or measuring or sending this stuff to different labs, right? We're not trying to change the testing, right? But we have to understand how much the testing matters. How much does the testing matter? So, do we blame cholesterol? When we go and we get tested and we have our cholesterol levels, our LDL levels, what are we really talking about? Does that really matter? Does that really matter? We just presented the case in which our fatty acids, when they're polyunsaturated, and they have these numbers of double bonds, right? That is just to say that they present a greater susceptibility, right? If that is what's making up our LDL particle, it makes our LDL particle, by definition, weaker and more problematic, right? That is really the problem here. Cholesterol, again, is just a passenger. If we look at this, it's just a passenger in LDL, remember? It's just a passenger. That means it's riding in there, right? And when LDL crashes in our blood lining, we see cholesterol on the scene. But did cholesterol cause the crash? No, it didn't cause the crash. And that's really what we're getting at here. That's really what we're getting at here, right? So the cholesterol, right? It's a little passenger in this vehicle. I was trying to pull this up. It's a little passenger in this vehicle. But did it cause the crash? Right. So this is cholesterol, right? Or will it okay, no, forget it. I won't try to draw. But the cholesterol is riding here. The little orange dots, that's cholesterol. It's riding in the LDL particle inside and as well as on the membrane. So let's bring it back. Let's zoom out. We're super molecular right now. Let's try to recap and like make sure that this makes sense on a dang near intuitive level. Great question, Mr. Suds. That's going to be answered right now. So do we blame cholesterol? And are we just to avoid seed oils? Because here's the thing, it's tricky. This is why the authors of that study said that seed oils present no increase on markers of inflammation, because they haven't, oxidation. They don't present any increase in markers on oxidation. Oxidation is not modulated in the same way that inflammation is, right? You may do something that increases your inflammation, but does nothing to your levels of oxidation, right? They're two totally different systems, but they use the word markers because that is the thing that we can test for. But the bottom line is that when we talk about cholesterol, what are some of the action steps, right? What are some of the action steps? Should we actually be blaming cholesterol, right? Let's talk about it. Whoa, what the heck am I looking at? I'm so sorry. This is explained thoroughly in the description for video A, but it's very simple. Let's walk through it. This is very simple to walk through. It's just like walking through the park on a path. And let's go through the path. Let's see what color can red, that's perfect. Oh, perfect. We start here. A lot of sugar. Oh, you guys see where we're going. A lot of sugar leads to a state of hyperglycemia. Break this word down. Hyper means super, right? Hyper means super. Glyc means sugar. Emia refers to the blood. A lot of sugar in the blood. That's what hyperglycemia means, right? We actually have a receptor in the body that picks up what we call AGEs. These are AGEs. AGEs, it stands for advanced glycation end product. Forget that word, it does not matter. All you need to understand is that this happens in the body spontaneously. It's the combination of protein and sugar, but it happens spontaneously because of high sugar intake. This is a problem. This is also an item that acts as a key. It's a key that unlocks what we call RAGE. This RAGE is a receptor that we see there. This receptor has a downstream effect that causes free radicals. Free radicals are just one of the sub-terms of oxidation. You see where we're going with this? This is to say that eventually, through all these steps, and this does not take a long time, this is something that's like boom, 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 right? Sugar, a lot of sugar, combines with protein, activates on its lock, unlocks oxidation, right? This is another way to say oxidation. This oxidation influences our LDL, right? This is normal LDL. And then it becomes ox-LDL. And remember, you don't have atherosclerosis without first having modified LDL. Ox-LDL is modified LDL. This is advanced physiology. But you guys just understood that in less than 2 minutes. This is the conversation we should be having. There are things taking place here that are a little bit more advanced. And because of that, it's hard to just tell somebody, hey, sugar leads to atherosclerosis. You would be like, huh? But you guys now understand why we have to spend so much time talking about LDL, because we are literally talking about the fatty acids that make up the membrane, right? That is what we're going for here. This isn't it. That's not it. That's just one mechanism of sugar. Oh, it gets worse, guys. It gets worse. Not only is that the case, but this here is also the case. Let me see if I can turn this on here. Boom, boom. This here is also the case. LDL can become glycated itself. Remember, glyc, when you hear that word, it just means sugar. This white part, this protein, this can actually be one of the items that, remember, spontaneously combines with sugar and becomes what we call a advanced glycation end product. Now, when it's on an LDL particle, it's different terminology, sciencey stuff, doesn't matter. But the bottom line is that when we have a lot of sugar in the blood, this happens spontaneously because it's basically like, where do we put the sugar? Where does it go? Right? Our insulin is probably dysfunctional. It's not the most sensitive thing ever. And it just starts attaching itself to stuff. One of those things being LDL. And guys, guess what? We talked about modified LDL and how it presents the problem and eventually leads to cardiovascular disease. Glycated LDL is an official, another form of modified LDL. So we have two forms of modified LDL so far, both presented with sugar. Ox LDL, right? This downstream effects that eventually we get to, downstream effects of having a whole lot of sugar. Eventually we create more oxidation. This increases the chances of our LDL particle becoming oxidized. It happens, and then boom, cardiovascular disease. And glycated LDL, right? Double whammy with sugar. Oh, guys, that's not it. That's not even it. This is another video supplemented by the description by video B. Glucose, this video B is where I go deep into this, but glucose presents acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA, don't worry about the word, does not matter, just understand the concept, right? Acetyl-CoA, when there is a high concentration, right, when the body senses a high concentration, it starts to regulate or modulate what we call HMG-CoA reductase. HMG-CoA reductase, forget the name, doesn't matter, just understand the concept. This is a inhibitor, or I shouldn't say that. This stimulates the creation of cholesterol, right? Get this, glucose, we know that, that's sugar. Glucose breaks down essentially acetyl-CoA. High concentrations of acetyl-CoA eventually leads to the production of more cholesterol. So there's 3 separate pathways in which sugar is acting to increase our risk of cardiovascular disease, right? Remember, cholesterol isn't a problem. We're making more here, but that doesn't mean, right? We got to do something with it at the end of the day, right? The cholesterol isn't a problem as much as LDL being modified is, right? That's where our focus should be. But here's the thing. It's not to say that cholesterol count does not matter, right? So it's okay to go get our lipid profile. It's okay to go get our lipid profile and get our LDL measured. But if your lipid profile does not discriminate, remember we talked about the size. If your LDL profile does not discriminate on the size of your LDL particles, that's where we start to have to question, because we don't want to get our labs back and it just says LDL. We need to know, is this the small LDL I have in the body? And we don't have a standardized, to my knowledge, we don't have a standardized scale to say this amount of small LDL is a problem. Because remember, this should be clicking for you if you were here for the first stream. But remember, in that first stream, we talked about the problems on small LDL. It's greater atherogenic potential. It spends more time in the blood. It has less antioxidants. And when it's modified, that's when we start to get that cardiovascular disease, right? Right. They also have this small size, which allows them to be more penetrable into our arterial walls, right? So when we talk about foods that have cholesterol, right? I was talking to a friend the other day. He was like, yeah, man, I get the conversation about red meat, but it has cholesterol. So I'm just trying to get an understanding. This is the conversation we should be having. What's more important, cholesterol intake or sugar intake? Well, it's going to be really hard for me to build a case against cholesterol without using some observational research to try to make some, lofted risk. But really, there are just way too many actual scientific mechanisms that I just presented 3, and there are probably more, that eventually leads to the modification of LDL. And if LDL is being modified, then we are leading ourselves right into cardiovascular disease. I wonder if sugar in these microscopic forms is sticky. Good question, Isaac. Me too. But is that making sense, guys? Isn't that fascinating? Again, what should we do? Should we freak out? No. We just need to understand that this all can be modulated. We don't have to sit and be victim and scared of cholesterol. All of this can be modulated. Actually, all of this can be modulated. How so? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Sleep. Sleep. This is the MIMA study, or MIMA, MIMA study probably it is. It's on a Japanese population. This is observational, as in there was no experimentation groups, but they did get blood work and they did get measurements. But there was some self-reporting as well. But essentially what they found was that those that were getting adequate sleep, and you could check this site number 5 in the description, those who were getting adequate sleep had less small, dense LDL particles. Remember we used that SD-LDL, that small LDL. That's the dangerous LDL, right? We can modulate the size of our LDL. Fascinating study. Here's another one. This one is on fasting. Alternate day fasting over 8 to 12 weeks causes decreases in LDL cholesterol concentrations and increases in LDL particle size are often observed. Now, when I was not hip to LDL, I had this study for a little bit and it confused me. I was like, why is LDL bigger when we fast? Think about it. Think about it. LDL, when it's made by the liver, it's big initially because it has to make a whole lot of stops, right? It's like an Amazon truck filled with a lot of packages, or a water balloon filled with a lot of water. But as it goes and it drops these packages off, as it drops off fat around the body, it's like letting water out of that water balloon, and that particle gets smaller and smaller. The job is done a lot sooner, therefore can return to the liver when we don't have constant food coming into the body, right? Constant need to deliver, right? So it just makes sense on that scale. That small LDL particle is a lot more deleterious to our health than that large one. And now we know we can actually modulate it, right? And the third thing, just to give us a takeaway, is exercise, of course. Of course, exercise works too. Of course, right? I didn't need to present any science on this one. It's just simple, right? Sugar is energy, fat is energy, exercise, use energy. You get rid of it. Very simple, right? Moving the body helps. Not only that, we get a more adaptive vasculature, we get more adaptive, a more adaptive and efficient heart. All of these things help to decrease our chances of running into the most popular disease in the world. Okay, holy cow, that was a lot. How are we feeling? That was a lot. Did the concept make sense there? That's what I want to know. That the concept makes sense, right? The double bonds. I know I use that word. Phospholipids, right? LDL becoming modified. Does that make sense? And if not, if this did not click for you, I promise you that if you go down to the supplementary material in the description, you will walk away feeling like you can take on the world. You could take on the world. I get that, Saku. It's tough because this is a lot of stuff. If you could, where do you feel like you're slightly lost? And then maybe if you throw out a word that kind of threw you off, maybe I can talk about that a little bit more. Hopefully it gives everybody a little bit more clarity, right? But if we can kind of break this down top to bottom, so let's give it a fair recap, right? When you go get your lipid profile, you get LDL, you get HDL. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about HDL. It's not necessarily irrelevant in this conversation. We talked about LDL. LDL is a biomarker. Let's go slow here. Let's go slow. Let's make sure this all makes sense. And it'll probably help to look at it and draw on it. Boom shakalaka. Right? Right. LDL is a biomarker. We throw a blanket statement over it. We say, hey, LDL is bad. We say LDL is bad. Oh, no, no, no. But there's way too much nuance to let that blanket statement be, right? So I got you, Card. Let me come back to that. This is gonna be the final piece to kind of hopefully bring everything together. So we have this here. We have our LDL particle, right? Everything's present here. Everything's present here. We have triglycerides, we have cholesterol here, we have phospholipids, right? The only thing that really matters right now are phospholipids. The only thing that really matters right now are phospholipids. But Johnny, what are the phospholipids? These. Let's get a different color. These. Nope. Nope. Huh, that's a nice color. Oh my goodness. How many cycles of color does it go through? These are our phospholipids. These little yellow tails, right? What does this look like? This looks like this, right? Blue head, yellow tails. Blue head, yellow tails, right? That's what we're talking about here. That's what we're talking about here. These actually are what determine the level of susceptibility to oxidation. When these fatty acid tails are highly polyunsaturated or highly unsaturated, right? We actually increase our chances of this entire particle going bad. When this entire particle goes bad, it's known as a modified LDL. When it's a modified LDL, it triggers a macrophage. The macrophage comes and chomps it. The macrophage becomes dysfunctional. The macrophage aggregates around our blood vessels. Once it gets there, it gets sticky. There's a lot of inflammation. This takes place over time. Boom, cardiovascular disease. Remember, there's a pivot point though. None of that takes place without LDL first becoming modified. Soybean oil isn't bad just for the sake of being bad. What it does is it just armors up our LDL particles with more polyunsaturated fatty acids, which before anything else makes them weaker. And when they're weaker, they have greater chances of going bad. When they go bad, we get cardiovascular disease, right? So we talked about LDL, we talked about the 4 claims, but none of them matter as much as oxidation. The claim that they made on oxidation, right? So soybean oil just gives our LDL, it gives the body ammunition for cardiovascular disease, right? We can modulate our chances of running into it by taking care of those things that help scale back oxidation: sleep, exercise, killing the sugar, right? I showed 3 separate mechanisms of how that sugar worked. Okay. Dennis, I'm just gonna connect the 3. For me, I now need to. Yeah. Okay. That's okay. All right. So you have successfully, Dennis says, you have successfully connected the 3 segments together for me. Unfortunately for me, I now need to rewatch all 3 of these segments. So I'm gonna make sure this doesn't run entirely too long so people can actually digest this. But hopefully I'm able to pull out some clips as well. Probably get those things up as shorts, but this will live on the internet forever. This is one of those things that I wish I was taught about cholesterol and LDL. I wish I understood cholesterol is not LDL. Cholesterol is a passenger in LDL, right? These are some of the things I wish I knew for all of this stuff to make sense. So if this doesn't all click right now, that's fine. Check out that supplementary material. That is going to help you immensely. After that, possibly come back to this, watch it, watch the first part, see if things start to click. If nothing still clicks, leave it alone. Let it simmer. As you go in your health journey, you come across more people talking about cholesterol and LDL. you're going to remember, oh, Johnny was talking about that at some point. And you're going to come back, boom, you're going to get your aha moment. So if you didn't get it now, it will come later. Okay, great question, Mark. He says, I'm still not clear about the difference between glycated and oxidated. Modified LDL is the thing that we want to avoid. But modified LDL is a non-specific term. It's just a general umbrella term. Under the umbrella are different types of modified LDL. One type is ox-LDL, oxidative LDL, right? You can call it whatever. And the other type is glycated LDL. Both of those two things, for all intents and purposes, cause the same problem. But that's the difference between them. Hope that answers your question, Mark. Does that answer your question? Does that answer your question? Yeah. They present the same problem, right? Fascinating. Fascinating. Guess I missed it. Guess I missed the UN proof was found this information. Had to restart it. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Mark. I'm so glad that helped. I'm a teacher at heart, so when people ask questions, I'm like, okay, I gotta make this make sense, right? So, if you guys did not see part 1, if you're coming into this, it's not going to make sense. You got to check out part 1 and then come into this later. All right, guys, this was an awesome stream. Thank you guys so much for checking this out. Hope you got some insight and some value. Hope your perspective was shifted. I love this stuff. I love talking about nuance. You guys know that's my favorite word. Let's get a peace out here. Let's get some purple hearts in the chat, guys. Purple hearts in the chat. Thank you, Sarah. Let's get some purple hearts in the chat. Purple hearts, purple hearts. Ruby, you got it. Absolutely, you got it. Thanks, guys, for being here. Thank you guys so much. Purple hearts, purple hearts. Yeah. Yeah, light it up, purple hearts. Purple heart, purple heart, purple heart. Thanks, Renee. Thank you guys so much for being here. Video on the way soon. Exciting things on the way. So many announcements, so many cool things that are developing. You guys are on a very special corner of the internet. Join the Patreon below if you guys want behind the scenes stuff. Roberta, old phone won't give me purple heart. Boo, old phone, boo. You guys take care. Thank you guys so much for joining in. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Eat some good food. Take care of yourself. What's your body fat percentage? Thanks In and Out for the 2. I have not checked my body fat percentage in a long time, but it's under 5%. It's very low. It's very low. It's under 5%. Yeah, I almost went to a tangent, but yeah. Thank you so much for the 2. Take care, y'all. Peace out. Love, love, love. Purple hearts.